The model Hamas at Columbia with our friend Kamani James that we've heard from out right now, sidelined by the administration. And the negotiations breaking down. We heard from another representative of the model Hamas at Columbia from their headquarters, their embankment.
Right, that they've already renamed after a girl from Gaza who was killed by an Israeli airstrike.
Their liberated zone. Yes. Yeah, oh, of course. They have the Seas building. They're expanding their empire on the campus of Columbia. Here's what this dude said, sending a message to the appeasers in the administrative offices that they are not impressed with the scare tactics.
These repulsive scare tactics mean nothing compared to the deaths of over 34,000 Palestinians. We will not move until Columbia meets our demands or they are moved by force. Columbia's threat to mass suspend, evict, or possibly expel students with only a few hours' notice violates university rules. Faculty in the University Senate who rejected Columbia's plan because it is illegal, were informed that rules of university conduct will not be applied in this instance because the university has declared a state of emergency to manufacture consent for mass suspensions and evictions. Protesters have been entirely peaceful, and the university has previously agreed that it has no grounds to call in the NYPD. This is not stopping Columbia from illegally declaring a state of emergency, which requires Columbia to falsely identify nonviolent protesters as a clear and present danger. Columbia's threats, distributed through flyers, are reminiscent of the flyers the Israeli army launches from the sky to Gazans. Today's threats come after days of fruitless negotiations in which the university refused to seriously consider our demands for divestment, financial transparency, and amnesty for students and faculty disciplined in the movement for Palestinian liberation.
And the genocide at Columbia. And the genocide.
They think these kids feel entitled?
Oh,
Ooh,
boy.
What have we created?
They are under assault from an illegal war that the Columbia administration has declared on these students. This is good stuff. I mean, if it wasn't a representation of something so ugly and serious, but these temper tantrums, high-minded as they effort to be, are morbidly entertaining to me. I don't know. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by a Columbia University grad.
Uh-oh, how's he feeling today?
How's she feeling?
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I don't know if maybe she can intercede and be part of the peace brokering process. Lionel Shriver is a contributor to the Spectator and best-selling author of We Need to Talk About Kevin and the recently released Mania. And she joins us now. Lionel, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Always nice to talk to you.
Has Columbia reached out to you to intercede on behalf of peace on the campus?
Funnily enough, no.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, Columbia has never acknowledged my existence or capitalized on the fact that I am one of their alumna. I don't think that I don't think they're especially proud of me.
Well, yeah, you're a colonizer, right? Is that the problem? You're one of those colonizers that the kids are talking
and a
about?
white supremacist.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
All that boring shit.
What's your review of all of this goings on college campuses starting at Columbia?
Well, it inevitably reminds me of the whole 1968-69 ruckus, in which I did not play a part. I was only 11 years old in 1968, and therefore also didn't then have the intellectual acumen to perceive how utterly pointless these demonstrations are. But in my hoary old age, it's pretty obvious that these protests are elaborately misdirected. I mean, Columbia University does not have any ability to affect the war in Gaza.
Right.
No one in Gaza, no one in Israel gives a toss what Columbia students think of what's happening. And they're not going to have an effect on the Biden administration, especially either, whose effect on reality is also tangential. So it's a little painful. I mean, it's an act of hubris and vanity to imagine that all this posturing makes any difference to the real world.
Well, you know who's happy about it is Hamas. I mean, they think that this is great.
Of course. And, I think, however comical it is for organizations like Lesbians for Palestine,
Right.
they just the far left in the U.S. is just as undemocratic and vicious as the people in Hamas, and in some ways they're the same kind of extremists. And it seems at first that these are strange bedfellows, but in actual fact, it's a natural embrace.
Well, right. And there's sort of a mania to this as well, as you see, it happened on a few campuses. Then, of course, that everybody else who's similarly disposed on campuses across the Western world wants to get in on the program. And you gave a good interview to Brendan O'Neill, our friend Brendan O'Neill at Spiked on his podcast. And I enjoyed your observation. We've talked a little bit about it before as well, but on manias, obviously we went through a mania with COVID. This is a sort of mania as well. It is when some of these people are talked to and they demonstrate their just rank ignorance about what they're protesting, who they're protesting, what they understand about the conflict, what they understand just generally about the world. So there's definitely a maniacal element to it. And I just wanted to sort of get your sort of restatement of how you see manias proceeding and how this one probably will.
Well, I'd have to agree that I would classify this Palestinian eruption across the United States especially, but it's also in other Western countries, especially the Anglosphere. I would characterize it as yet another mania. My new novel, which is called, unsurprisingly, Mania, is an examination of this phenomenon, and it's especially addressing itself to the last dozen years that I have just watched these huge ideological obsessions sweep across the West with astonishing, and I have to say alarming, rapidity and universality. It started out with the obsession with transgenderism, then there was the Me Too movement. The COVID spread like potato blight across the planet. The Black Lives Matter movement, and I would also say that at this point the climate alarmism also has all the characteristics. And it's you know that you're in the midst of a mania when everyone is saying the same thing, everyone thinks the same thing, and it is not permitted to differ. And that was the case with each of these consuming, what we're upset about now things. And I think what strikes me as transparently pathetic about the whole Palestinian thing is that it was the immediacy with which the left just got the message that despite the fact that October 7th in Israel was one of the most grotesque and morally disgusting events in recent history, which you would think that just any normal, decent person would find revolting. But, within a couple of days, the left had pivoted from any sympathy with Israel, and this was before there was any retaliation on Israel's part militarily, we're pro-Palestinian. We're all for Hamas. And you actually had people on the left defending or by turns denying that October 7th even happened. And I find this kind of groupthink horrifying. It's actually, that's not really the right word, because groupthink has the word think in it. It's completely unthinking conformism. And so, of course, they don't know what they're talking about. They've just got the memo. This is what you're supposed to be upset about now. And they operate as almost as a single organism. And from any distance, it's like, what is this? This is not like individual, independent human beings. This is just a mob. And that's the way the left is now. And it's as if they're taking directions from some hidden force. You can blame social media if you like. That is clearly one of the main vectors of spreading what we're supposed to be upset about now. But and that's one of the explanations for why these manias spread internationally so quickly. But
yeah.
I wouldn't let these people off the hook just because they're on social media. It doesn't mean that you don't have the responsibility to think for yourself.
Right. I'm just surprised that there isn't more mania fatigue. You just mentioned you're careening from one to the other, and you mentioned a half dozen that all qualify. And you would think that at some point people would not just turn over their institutions as I'm getting, force-fed the latest orthodoxy on the latest apocalyptic challenge to humanity. Yeah, I'm surprised by the lack of mania fatigue where sensible people say, knock it off.
Yeah. Well, it is exhausting. And I think these manias vary a little bit in so far as they take the entire population with them. There's usually an element that hives off and says, hold on here, or this isn't making any sense. I think one of the most successful manias remains the transgenderism thing. Mm-hmm. That because we all got the message mysteriously, and I don't quite understand how this was communicated, that if we're uncomfortable with celebrating, pretending to change sex, we'd better keep our mouths shut. And for the most part, we did. And to my personal shame, it must have been a good 3 or 4 years into that elaborate celebration of transgenderism, which used to involve an almost immeasurably small number of human beings, that I finally spoke up and said, there's something wrong with this. I had very little company at that time, and it took years and more, and that would have been 2016. It took many years more for it finally to start to break that it was permissible to say, this is disturbing. This is mutilating children's bodies. This is ruining their ability to have a satisfying sex life. What good is it doing, and while doing a great deal of harm? It's possible for me to say that on the radio now, and I don't fear that someone's going to show up at my door with a bomb. But that was not the case for an uncanny period of time, and that is the nature of these consuming social moral panics. That's another word for them. Is that if you differ, you are not simply someone who disagrees. You are a heretic. You're an evil person. You're in the case of transgenderism, you are a transphobe. It is a danger to your livelihood and reputation to swim against the tide.
Lionel Shriver is a contributor to The Spectator. She's the best-selling author of We Need to Talk About Kevin and the recently released Mania that she referenced. Lionel, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
President Ronald Reagan immortalized the phrase, "It's morning in America." These words symbolized a fresh start and a new